Hi and welcome to my podcast, Discourses. Here, I introduce you to new and interesting people from different walks of life. And today, I have here my friend Moustapha. He's an old friend of mine. And Moustapha is a recent graduate from Heriot-Watt University. He graduated in civil engineering, and he's one such person who has keen interest in politics, history, and city planning. Well, I met him at the Heriot Road campus in Dubai, and he introduced me to the concept of Model United Nations. Well, he was one among the people who introduced me to Model United Nations. Well, essentially, what it is it's a debate society. And so I've seen him debate, I've seen him moderate debates, and also I've seen him train aspiring debaters. And so well, to describe him in one single sentence, I would say he's the one person who would give you the most random fact at the most random times. And so, welcome to this episode, Moustapha. Glad to have you.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, it's been a while since I last saw you. It's been like, say, the last time I saw you was in 2019, I think so.
I think so, yeah. I think it was about 3 years, 4 years. Time flies.
Yeah, time flies. And so, what have you been up to lately? Like, what do you do right now since you've graduated?
Yeah, I've just graduated in late June. I'm just on vacation right now. Doing a bit of paperwork. I'm at home right now in Egypt. I'm from Egypt, and um, yeah, I'm just getting my things sorted out between the transition into work and also trying to spend as much time as I can with the family, as you can see from my locked room. Um, but yeah, that's what I'm doing right now until the beginning of autumn.
Hmm. And so, are you still sharpening your blade, essentially, like in terms of debates? Are you still active in debate societies? Do you still do that kind of thing nowadays?
So actually, the last time I've done it was in 2020.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't done it in quite a while since the pandemic started. Obviously, it's been really difficult to do any of that, but I'm still in contact with everyone I've like met through that, and it's kind of built like a nice little network of friends who you still talk to about these issues because they have the same interests. But also, yeah, I haven't really been focusing on that. I've started focusing more on things that have to do with what I study, so civil engineering, and from like after the lockdown started, I started working with a team of students on building like a sustainable house for a competition in Dubai. It's called the Solar Decathlon,
Uh-huh.
and we ended up going there. I didn't go there, but like a delegation of us went there. I was in charge of like doing some drawings or some calculations for the roof or for the foundations. And it was like very heavily weighed on sustainability and the future um, and somehow linked really well with the debate history because a lot of the conferences I was in were focused on sustainability and sustainable development and what kind of vision do we have for the future. So it was a nice little transition, and it kind of opened my eyes into how like my degree fits in all of these questions. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing since then, but I haven't really been doing any public speaking since then.
Okay. What exactly in sustainability are you interested in?
I think I'm mostly interested in sustainable transport, but also the community aspect of it. So, well, in 2021, that was like the year I had my bachelor dissertation. I had to do with the community aspect of like changing a street design to make it more sustainable and how people are reacting to it and how to deal with the negative reactions and how to do that right. So that's I think the idea of like reconciling a lot of different views, because sustainability means different things to different people, but also,
Yes,
you know, people have to eat, and it doesn't have to come um, uh, at the behest of people who are trying to do their jobs or have economic growth. There's quite a lot of anxieties around it as well, as to what kind of change are we having, and how we're having that change. So this is, I think, the aspect that I was most interested in.
mm-hmm.
And again, just because it goes back to, you know, what we were doing with debates and the whole, I think we were talking for some time about like stakeholder engagement, and that's a thing that we do a lot as well with my degree, that we did a lot with my degree, and that I'm planning to do as well in the workplace later on.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, as you said, like one of the issues with sustainability is not sustainability in itself, like the technology is there, but it's the communication problem. You need to like tell the stakeholders what exactly is being changed. And there's a lot of anxiety related to this, like what happens when resources are diverted to like sustainable initiatives? Like, do we still get food to eat? Are we like sacrificing all of this for that?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think there's the part that's just an anxiety around change, but there's also the part of um, really at the end of the day, you know, when you're designing something or when you're um, building policy or whatever, the end game is you're serving a community. So um, if you can't have sustainability with that community, you can't say, okay, we're gonna have, I don't know, like bike lanes everywhere, but your disabled section of your community can't go anywhere, or you have made it too expensive for people to go to their workplace, or you have killed people's jobs and livelihoods. And so some part of it is anxiety around change. Actually, I found out the most part of it is anxiety around change. It was
Anxiety.
mostly people like my dissertation, for instance, was about like an active mobility project in Edinburgh, where I live, and it was about taking away some space from cars and give it to bicycles and to give it to pedestrians. And a lot of people had a lot of anxiety around it, very adamantly against it. And then when I asked them, like, have you driven in the past year? They were like, no. So why? But it was like we weren't consulted, or just any kind of anxiety around change.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, it's different from place to place, from culture to culture. Some towns are less open to change. I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent, but back when the car was like the thing of the future, um, in Edinburgh there was kind of a plan to adapt the city to the car and have like a big sort of urban motorway, like you have in many big cities,
American
and the
cities,
people were,
yeah.
yeah, and the people of the city were very adamantly against the car. And now that active mobility is kind of the trend in transport, the same townsfolk are like very adamantly against bicycles and pro car. And it's just sometimes it's cultural, and you could say that the city is like doesn't like change much, or is skeptical towards change, but also maybe that's a good thing, because had the planners had their way in the 60s, the city wouldn't have been like Edinburgh wouldn't have been you know, the important tourist hub that it is today, because it would have been completely destroyed by motorways.
Motorways, yeah,
So
true that.
yeah.
That's one thing I like about European cities. It's like the history of the place is very much intact. You can see places like 50 years, 100 years old, and you kind of feel connected to all of that. And
Yeah.
it, I'm happy with all of that instead of having a big motorway nearby. So, mm, I like to move on with, uh, in terms of like spending time. You mentioned you're on holidays right now. So, like, are you reading up on anything um, that would be that is exciting or something like that sort?
I'm honestly finding it really difficult to have any kind of to stick to anything I start. So I just randomly start books and not finish them. Um, Being in like my childhood bedroom, I kind of get to rediscover some of the old books I had, but nothing really in particular. Like I started, I think, the Iliad for starting the summer. and um, dropped it somewhere and never finished it. Um, and now I'm just like, going left and right, reading a bit about this, a bit about that, rediscovering some old like
Classics.
obsessions I had as a child, yeah, or some classics, yeah.
Good stuff. And so I personally had a Roman phase for me, like 1 year ago around this time. I was reading a lot about Roman history and so on. So it's just a phase you have. And
Actually,
so,
speaking of Romans, I picked up this little magazine while I was flying here,
uh-huh.
um, about the Byzantines and
Byzantines, yeah.
yeah, who are the true successors of Rome. I
Rome.
will fight people over that. Um, and yeah, I find it really interesting because it's about the connection between the Normans, like the descendants of the Vikings, and the Byzantine Empire, and how there was quite a lot of connection between them from the beginning of the Viking Age up until the fall of Constantinople. So we're talking about a period of 600, 700 years. Um, yeah, so that's something I stuck to and read. And but that's
That's,
because it's like 50 pages long. So
mm.
um,
Well, the thing about reading history is that you get to know your place in the unfolding of the story of the world, essentially. So it's like you have, like, us as individuals, we also have a place in the unfolding story of our world. So you get to know more about it while we read
yeah, I
history.
agree. I agree, but also like I like to see some of like the aspect in which how much these people are kind of the same as the people today with all the differences, and they can be just as petty or as as funny or as they kind of have the same traits at the end of the day. And I find this very, very funny, like the things that excite them or the things that they're scared of are more or less the same things that excite us today or worry us today, other than climate change. That's a bit different, but
Yeah, that's interesting. Talking about history, we'll stick on to that. Like, I've seen some posts you put on Instagram related to like museums and exhibits, and I was thinking, like, do you have any recommendations and must-visit museums, exhibits?
so that's completely unrelated. Well, not completely, but a bit unrelated to the Romans. But back in March, I went to Belgrade in Serbia,
Mm-hmm.
and their national museum was in a bank. Is in a bank. It was what used to be a bank, and so they've turned the coffers into like small exhibition halls, and they've got one of them has a history of money
Uh-huh.
from the land that is Serbia today. So from back in Roman times up until the Byzantine era, the first Serbian empires, all the way to the Ottoman era, and then the beginning of the independence, Yugoslavia, and the modern age. And you can tell like the entire history of the country just through the coins and banknotes that they have, because oftentimes they have the different rulers as well on them, and so you can tell, like you can easily, like my friend was showing us around, and she was telling us the history of the country through the different faces that were on the money.
Mm-hmm.
I found it really cool because it was like in the coffers of an old bank that was turned into the National Museum in Belgrade.
Yeah. Um, it's like each coin, like a new ruler comes in, the first thing they might change is the coinage so that people know there's a new ruler,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah. And so, how about in Egypt? I know there's a lot of history to Egypt, and there's this idea I've been reading about lately. Like, even right now, there are new discoveries in Egypt. So it's kind of like Egypt keeps on giving new treasures to the world. So do you have
yeah.
any places? Well, of course there are places, but do you have uh, any areas that you're really interested in terms of Egyptian history?
I think there's just way too many, but one area I kind of like, which is very um, eclectic in the image of Cairo, is the old city of Al Fustat. So before there was Cairo, there was Al Fustat, and before there was Al Fustat, there was like a Roman fort in this
Mm-hmm.
area. And today it's like an area called that we call old Egypt, not old Cairo, but old Egypt, Masr al-Adima, and that's got um, kind of um, quite a lot of vestiges from. It was the first Islamic capital in Cairo when the Arabs came in. They took this fort, um, the fort of Babylon, which was a Roman fort, and actually they didn't fight the locals because there was a schism between the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox churches. And so the Arabs promised that the Oriental Orthodox would have freedom of conscience if they let the Arabs in. And that's how they took this fort. And why I like this area is because it's got the vestiges of the Islamic era. It's got the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization, which like its main hall counts the whole history of the country from an anti-clockwise.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to see everything from the very beginning up until the modern era, but not through the lens of the history of the great kings like we usually do it, but through a history of the people, of their everyday practices. So you get to see their food, and you get to see their everyday items like the makeup and everything, up until the modern era where you get to see the architecture or the traditional dresses. And that's like at the end of the street. And then you go down and you find the most historical part, which is the fortress,
Mm-hmm.
which is also where it is believed that the Holy Family came to rest. And so there's quite a lot of monasteries there. There's the Hanging Church, which is built on two different towers of like hanging over one of the towers of the fortress.
Mm-hmm.
And there's I think the Church of Saint Sergius and Bacchus,
Mm-hmm.
or like two saints from Mesopotamia. And then when you go down, there's a cave where Jesus was hiding. And then when you go down the street, there's no, before you go down the street, there's the monastery of Saint George, where he was martyred. And then when you go down the street, you find one of the oldest synagogues in Cairo, which actually used to be a church, but the Christians didn't pay their taxes that year, couldn't afford their taxes that year under Muslim rule. And so the Jewish community paid their taxes in exchange for the church, which became a synagogue. And it is believed that, this is the place where Moses as a baby was found by the wife of Pharaoh. So it's a very, like, it's 1 square kilometer where kind of everything happened. And we're not even talking about ancient history. It's just like everything from, the year 0 onwards.
Sure. That, like, I remember when I was in 10th grade, I used to stay with my grandfather, and we used to, like, in the evening sit together and watch the television documentaries on Egypt. And even though it was like the person went in there for 2 weeks, the documentary was aired for like 1 month. That's the amount of content that the people were able to like mine out of 1 week of video footage. And so it's someday I'll end up coming there. And
Yeah.
so what's the future for you looking like? Like, are you planning on any trips, adventures?
So right now I'm honestly leaving. I'm still trying to settle down with the whole transition into working in October. So I'm not really making any plans for any trips, but I'm hoping to get back to this soon. But so far there aren't really any plans because I'm still, just drowning in like a sea of paperwork. And it can get overwhelming if I'm doing that and also trying to think about plans. And so all I'm looking forward for is just for, spend a good summer, try to get as much of the paperwork done as
Done as
possible,
possible,
and
yeah.
yeah,
Think about
and as
trips
early as
and
possible.
yes, think about trips and other things late after.
Yeah,
settling in, you know.
which in my case require quite a lot of paperwork as well because visa. So
Yes, I
yeah.
completely understand. And so I think it's a good place to end. And is there anything you want to say, like as a closing note, like a line you live by or a quote that really uh, compels you to do things and so on?
I actually have this quote from a film, believe it or not.
Uh-huh.
Um, because over the summer I've been watching quite a lot of films, and it's from a Spanish film called All About My Mother. And one of the characters is a woman who comes on stage and she's like um, having to do an interlude because the actors are not here, and
Mm-hmm.
she's talking about all the surgeries that she's had to do. She's like, oh, this costs this much, this costs this much, and then she says, well, as I was saying, it costs a lot to be authentic, ma'am. And one can't be stingy with these things because you are more authentic the more you resemble what you've dreamt of being. And
Class.
it's just like it was my favorite character in the whole film. It was
Just because of that line. Yeah, that was the end of the episode with Moustapha. If you liked it, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also share it amongst your friends. Spread the word. And until next episode, bye for now.